The disgrace began before her name was spoken. It moved through the great house like a draft slipping beneath doors, stirring candles, lifting hymns, carrying the brittle music of laughter that pretended to be polite. By the time she descended the back stair, she already felt reduced to a rumor, something half-seen and easily dismissed. No one met her eyes. They did not need to. In such places, shame traveled faster than footsteps. She had been told to leave quietly. That word, quietly, was offered as mercy, as if humiliation could be softened by the absence of witnesses. Yet even silence had ears. She sensed them in the walls, in the stone corridors that once echoed with her careful steps when she was still tolerated, still useful, still invisible enough to remain. Now she was neither welcome nor entirely erased, suspended in that cruel interval society reserved for women it wished to forget. The rain had begun by the time she crossed the yard, a thin, needling rain that found every weakness in cloth and resolve. Lantern light trembled against the wet stones, making the world appear unsteady, as though it might tilt and spill her into darkness if she misstepped. She held her cloak close, not for warmth alone, but to preserve the last fragments of dignity she possessed. There were worse things than poverty, she had learned. Exposure was one of them. The stables offered shelter not because they were kind, but because they were indifferent. Horses shifted in their stalls, breathing out clouds of warm air that smelled of hay and leather. The familiar sounds steadied her. Animals did not ask why she had been cast out, did not measure her worth by whispers overheard at dinner. She moved carefully, choosing a corner where the straw lay thick and dry, and there she allowed herself to sit, then to rest her head against the rough timber. Only then did the ache arrive, slow and insistent, filling her chest as though it had been waiting for permission. She had been sent away for being inconvenient. Not wicked, not loud, not defiant, merely inconvenient. In a world governed by order and inheritance, such a crime was unforgivable. She had learned early how to make herself small, how to anticipate moods, how to soften rooms with her presence without ever claiming them. It had not saved her. It never did. Somewhere beyond the stable walls, the estate slept under its mantle of respectability. The Duke's house, they called it, with a tone that implied permanence, authority, and a moral clarity she had never possessed. She had seen him only from a distance before, a tall, composed figure passing through halls as though they bent to accommodate him. He belonged to the architecture. She did not. That knowledge settled over her now, heavy as the rain. Sleep took her reluctantly, the kind that comes not from comfort but exhaustion. Her dreams were shallow and easily broken, haunted by the memory of voices lowered just enough to wound. When she stirred, it was not from fear but from a presence she could not name. The horses had gone still. The night itself seemed to pause. A shape emerged from the far end of the stable, moving with a confidence that suggested ownership. The wolf dog stepped into the lantern's reach, massive and pale-eyed, its coat darkened by rain. It regarded her without hostility, head slightly tilted, as though considering a problem rather than a threat. She held her breath, instinct urging stillness. There was no reason for it to spare her. It did not growl. It did not advance. It merely watched, patient and unsettling in its calm. Footsteps followed, measured and unhurried, the sound of boots upon stone announcing a man accustomed to being obeyed. Light shifted, and with it came the unmistakable sense of order reasserting itself. The Duke entered the stable as if it were an extension of his own body, carrying a lamp that cut through the shadows with practiced assurance. His face was grave, his expression shaped by years of restraint rather than cruelty. He stopped when he saw her, surprise flickering briefly before discipline smoothed it away. Neither spoke at once. The silence between them was not empty. It was weighted with consequence. She rose, unsteady but determined, arranging her cloak with hands that refused to tremble. Whatever judgment awaited her, she would meet it standing. He observed her with a gaze that did not roam, did not intrude, yet missed nothing. In that look lay the power to dismiss her with a word, to turn her into a story told without her consent. "You are not one of my staff," he said at last, his voice low, precise, shaped by habit and command. "No, Your Grace," she replied, the title tasting strange and final upon her tongue. The wolf dog moved then, passing between them, its broad body a living boundary. The Duke's attention followed it, then returned to her, sharper now, as though something unaccountable had entered the equation. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof with renewed insistence. The stable felt suddenly smaller, charged with an expectation neither of them had summoned, and in that enclosed space, with society held at bay by walls and weather, the first fragile shift occurred. He did not tell her to leave. He set the lamp upon a hook and removed his gloves with deliberate care, as though time itself might be persuaded to slow. The light revealed the wear in her boots, the faint bruise at her wrist where a door had been closed too firmly, the resolve in her mouth that no kindness had yet earned. He took these details in without comment, and that, more than rebuke, unsettled her. Pity could be survived. Attention required courage. "You may remain," he said, choosing the words as one might choose a route across thin ice. "For the night." The offer was spare, stripped of sentiment, yet it altered the air between them. She inclined her head, gratitude contained, pride intact. He turned away before either could mistake the moment for something else, yet he did not go far. At the stable door he paused, listening to the storm and to something quieter within himself, a resistance he had not known he possessed. When the Duke finally departed, the lamp remained, casting a steady circle of light that refused to let her vanish. She sank back onto the straw, heart racing, aware that the night had not ended her exile, but transformed it. Names would be spoken, doors would close or open forever. She lay awake, staring at the rafters, the sound of the rain mingling with breathing beyond the door. For the first time since the whispers began, she did not feel entirely alone. Yet with that fragile comfort came a sharper fear, for she understood that being seen by such a man was its own peril. If dawn revealed her presence, it would not be as a rumor, but as a challenge, and the house that had cast her out would soon learn that the stable had kept a secret it was not prepared to face. Morning did not arrive gently. It came with the scrape of shutters, the cough of grooms, the metallic ring of buckets, and the inevitable spread of notice. The estate woke as it always did, efficient, ordered, confident in its permanence. But beneath that surface moved a current of disturbance, subtle yet unmistakable. Something had occurred in the night, something that did not belong to routine, and routine resented the intrusion. She woke before anyone summoned her, the lamp long extinguished, pale light filtering through the stable slats. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that her body ached with a dull persistence that came from sleeping guarded rather than resting. Then memory returned, sharp and immediate. The Duke, his voice, the unexpected permission that had altered the course of the night. She sat up, smoothing her skirts, bracing herself for whatever consequence daylight would bring. The wolf dog lay near the door, vast and motionless, its presence less threatening now than sentinel-like. When it opened its eyes, it did not rise. It only watched her, as though she were something entrusted rather than tolerated. She did not touch it, but the knowledge that it remained eased a tightness she had carried for too long. Outside, voices drifted closer. Her name was not spoken, but absence had a way of drawing attention. She stepped out just as the Duke crossed the yard, his stride unbroken, his coat immaculate despite the storm that had soaked the grounds hours before. He stopped when he saw her, not abruptly, but with a deliberate pause that signaled awareness rather than surprise. In the open light, the distance between them felt newly exposed. "You slept," he observed, his tone neutral, as though this were a matter of fact rather than permission granted. "I did," she replied, meeting his gaze without challenge. "Thank you." A groom lingered too near, curiosity thinly veiled as duty. The Duke's glance dismissed him at once, and the man retreated, chastened. Authority required no raised voice. She registered that with a faint, unwelcome admiration. Men like him did not need to explain themselves. They simply were. "Come," he said, turning toward the stable interior. "There is work to be done, and I will not have it delayed by conjecture." She followed, uncertain of her place, but unwilling to retreat. Within the stable, the air was warmer, the smells grounding. He spoke briefly to the head groom, issuing instructions that shifted arrangements with the ease of habit. Then, almost as an afterthought, he gestured toward her. "She will assist," he said. No justification followed. The words landed heavily, altering the balance of the room. Eyes flicked toward her, measuring, reassessing. She felt herself once again become an object of consideration, but this time the terms were different. She was not being hidden. She was being placed. The work was simple enough: sorting tack, wiping down wood, steady tasks that allowed her hands to move while her thoughts raced. She was aware of the Duke's presence even when he was not beside her, the way one is aware of a fire in winter: contained, necessary, dangerous if mishandled. He did not hover. He did not explain. That restraint unsettled her more than scrutiny would have. By mid-morning, the house could no longer pretend ignorance. A lady's maid passed the stable door twice without purpose. A footman lingered at the edge of the yard, pretending to check a latch. The rumor had found its footing. She felt it like a pressure at her back, urging her to bend, to apologize for breathing where she had not been invited. The Duke returned, carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one down within her reach, not meeting her eyes. "You will hear things," he said quietly. "It is the nature of such places." "I have always heard things," she answered. "They do not improve with repetition." Something shifted then, small but perceptible. His mouth curved, not quite a smile but an acknowledgement. He studied her more closely now, as though recalibrating a judgment formed too hastily. "Do you wish to leave?" he asked. The question surprised her into stillness. She considered honestly, weighing pride against survival. "No," she said at last. "Not if leaving means becoming what they already believe." He inclined his head, accepting the answer as one accepts a fact that cannot be altered. "Then you will remain under my authority," he said. "That is the condition." Protection offered without tenderness carried its own cost. She understood that. To stay would be to bind herself to his reputation, his scrutiny, his rules. Yet she had lived under worse dominion, enforced by people who had not even bothered to be fair. "I accept," she said. The day unfolded with a strained civility. Instructions were followed. Eyes were averted too late. By afternoon, the tension had hardened into something brittle. It broke when a carriage arrived unannounced, bearing a distant relation with too much interest in propriety. The woman's gaze found her at once, sharp with recognition that did not require introduction. "How curious," the visitor remarked, loud enough to be overheard. "I had not heard you were employing charity now." The words hovered, inviting agreement. The Duke did not raise his voice when he answered. "Nor am I," he said. "I am correcting an omission." Silence followed, heavy and irrevocable. The visitor withdrew, scandal postponed but not defeated. She stood very still, aware that a line had been crossed on her behalf, and that such crossings were rarely forgiven. When evening came, she returned to the stable, uncertain whether this was habit or decree. The Duke joined her there, the wolf dog at his side. The light was fading, the air cooling, the world narrowing to the space they shared. "You have complicated matters," he said, not unkindly. "So have you," she replied, the honesty escaping before caution could restrain it. He considered her in the dimming light, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said, "and I do not yet know why." As he turned away, leaving her once more with shelter but no answers, she understood that the night had shifted them both. She was no longer merely sheltered. She was implicated. And somewhere between the stable walls and the watching house, the first true scandal had begun to take shape. The Duke did not summon her to the house. That omission mattered. Instead, he asked her to meet him where the gravel path bent toward the paddock, a place neither public nor hidden, suspended between labor and leisure. Morning light rested there differently, filtered through thin clouds that softened the world without disguising it. She arrived early, hands clasped, spine straight, prepared for whatever judgment had finally ripened. He was already waiting. His coat was plain, his posture unguarded in a way that felt intentional, as though he had chosen this ground to unmake himself slightly. The wolf dog sat at his heel, watchful but calm, its presence a reminder of instincts that answered to no hierarchy. When the Duke spoke, it was without preamble. "You will tell me the truth," he said. It was not a command dressed as courtesy, but an invitation that carried weight precisely because it could have been otherwise. She inhaled, the air cool and sharp, and nodded. "I will," she said. The promise cost her more than she expected. They walked as they spoke, steps aligning without discussion, a small, revealing harmony. She told him what had happened in careful fragments, not dramatizing, not defending. Words like dismissal and burden surfaced, stripped of ornament. She explained how usefulness had been mistaken for worth, how silence had been mistaken for consent. Her voice did not waver, but her hands tightened, betraying the effort it took to remain composed. He listened without interruption. That too was rare. Men in his position often heard only what confirmed their conclusions. When she finished, he did not respond at once. They stopped near the fence, the wood weathered smooth by years of patience. "You were wronged," he said finally. The simplicity of it struck her harder than sympathy would have. He did not soften the truth. He did not excuse the perpetrators. He named the injury and allowed it to stand. "It changes nothing," she replied. "What is done is done. It changes how I proceed," he said. She looked at him, then really looked, seeing not only the authority he carried, but the restraint that shaped it. There was fatigue in his eyes, the kind that came from long obedience to expectation. She sensed, without proof, that he understood exile differently than she did, but no less intimately. He offered her choices: employment, modest but respectable; passage to another county, arranged without spectacle; protection that would draw no further attention. Each was reasonable. Each preserved order. She weighed them, feeling the careful construction of a future she did not desire settle around her like a borrowed coat. "I will not disappear to make others comfortable," she said. The words emerged steady, surprising them both. "I've already done that once." The wolf dog rose, pacing a short distance before returning, unsettled by something unspoken. The Duke watched it, then her. "You would rather stay," he said. "I would rather remain myself," she answered. The choice shifted something fundamental between them. He nodded once, not in approval, but recognition. "Then understand this," he said. "Staying will cost you. It will test you. They will test me." "I know," she said. "They already have." A sound approached, footsteps too deliberate to belong to chance. They turned as one to see the housekeeper crossing the grass, her expression tight with purpose. She stopped just short of intrusion, eyes flicking between them. "Your Grace," she said. "There are questions." "Let them wait," he replied. The woman hesitated, then withdrew, carrying with her the promise of further complication. Silence settled again, altered now by proximity to consequence. The Duke exhaled slowly. "I do not enjoy defiance," he said, "but I will not retract it." She felt the gravity of that statement settle into her bones. He was not impulsive. Any line he crossed would be crossed once, deliberately, and never recanted. As the light shifted, he offered her a final choice, quieter than the others. She could leave before nightfall, unmarked by further association. Or she could remain, fully visible, her fate entwined with his name in ways neither could yet predict. She did not answer immediately. She studied the fence, the field beyond, the dog at his side. She considered what it meant to be seen, not as charity, not as burden, but as a woman whose presence altered a powerful man's course. "I will stay," she said. He inclined his head, acceptance and warning bound together. "Then we are no longer merely correcting an omission," he replied. "We are inviting judgment." As they parted, returning separately toward their respective domains, she understood that the conversation had not resolved the conflict, but sharpened it. Whatever safety he offered would come at the cost of scrutiny, and whatever dignity she preserved would be measured against his reputation. Behind her, the house loomed, alert now, aware that discretion had failed, and ahead of her stretched a future no longer hidden but dangerously, irrevocably acknowledged. The pressure did not announce itself loudly. It arrived in refinements. Invitations delayed, glances sharpened, conversations thinning the moment she entered a room or crossed a yard. The estate had absorbed her presence and was now resisting it, like a body rejecting what it could not immediately classify. She felt it everywhere, in the measured politeness of servants, in the sudden attentiveness paid to doors and thresholds, in the way silence followed her like a shadow that refused to detach. The Duke felt it too, though he never named it. He moved through his house with the same composure as always, but something in his bearing had tightened, as if he were holding a line against an unseen tide. Letters arrived daily, sealed with crests and assumptions. He read them alone, standing rather than sitting, as though stillness might invite compromise. Each missive carried a variation of the same concern, phrased with exquisite courtesy. The presence of a woman without position was becoming noticeable. It was in the late afternoon, when the light began to thin and the world turned contemplative, that he asked her to walk with him again. Not to the paddock this time, but along the boundary path that marked the edge of the estate, where stone met hedgerow and the land remembered what it had been before inheritance. She joined him without hesitation, aware that whatever was coming would not be softened by delay. "They will force the matter," he said, as if continuing a conversation already underway. "If not today, then soon." She did not ask who they were. That plural had haunted her life long enough to be familiar. "And you?" she asked. He glanced at her briefly. "I am expected to resolve it." The path narrowed, grass brushing their boots. Birds settled in the hedges, restless with the approaching evening. She sensed, beneath his calm, a resolve hardening into something final. He had always been decisive, but this was different. This was not management. This was risk. "I will not remain if my presence endangers what you have built," she said quietly. The words were an offering, not a plea. She had learned the cost of staying where one was resented. He stopped. The wolf dog halted with him, its attention fixed. He turned fully toward her now, the space between them charged not with impropriety, but truth. "You mistake the danger," he said. "What is threatened is not my estate. It is the illusion that it has always been just." The sentence unsettled her more than anger would have. She saw, in that moment, how deeply he had measured the cost, how deliberately he was choosing to bear it. His protection had never been casual. It had been principled. Still, principle was not enough to quiet the world. By evening, the house had shifted again, tightening like a fist. A formal call was announced. A distant aunt of impeccable lineage, arriving with concern thinly disguised as affection. The Duke received her in the drawing room, where portraits of dead relatives watched with disapproval perfected by time. She observed everything and missed nothing. "I trust this situation will be addressed," the aunt said, her gaze flicking toward the corridor as though she could see through walls. "People are speaking." "They always do," he replied. "Yes, but not usually with cause." The implication hovered, sharpened by civility. He ended the visit shortly thereafter, escorting her out with impeccable courtesy. When he returned, the house felt altered, as though a decision had been pressed into its very bones. He sought her out where she had taken refuge near the stable, the place that had first sheltered her without asking for explanation. Twilight had deepened, drawing long shadows across the ground. The wolf dog lay nearby, eyes following his approach. "They will not relent," he said, "and I will not remove you." Her breath caught, not from relief, but from the weight of what followed. "Then what will you do?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, stripped of ornament. "I will end the uncertainty." She understood him then, not fully, but enough to fear and hope in equal measure. Ending uncertainty was not a small act in such a world. It required irrevocable motion. "You owe me nothing," she said. "Not reputation, not defense. I owe myself clarity," he replied, "and you have made ambiguity impossible." The admission altered something fundamental. It was not love, he declared, nor rescue. It was recognition. She felt seen not as a problem to be solved, but as a presence that demanded honesty. The house behind them glowed faintly, windows lit like watchful eyes. Beyond the hedgerow, the world stretched indifferent, vast. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intentional. "If I act," he said, "there will be no retreat." She held his gaze, aware that whatever came next would shape them both. She did not speak, because silence, at that moment, was the only response that carried truth. As the first stars emerged, faint and resolute, the estate stood poised on the edge of transformation. Somewhere within its walls, plans were already unraveling, alliances quietly rethinking themselves. And in the deepening dusk, with the stable behind them and the house waiting, the Duke turned toward her with a decision no longer deferred, leaving the night itself to bear witness to what he would soon declare. Night settled with unusual stillness, as though the estate itself had drawn a careful breath. Lamps were dimmed earlier than custom, corridors emptied sooner than habit allowed, and the great house adopted the posture of restraint it wore best when decisions were being made beyond the reach of gossip. She felt that quiet as she always had, through her bones, through the small hesitations of those who passed her, through the careful avoidance that betrayed how closely she was being watched. He did not send for her. Instead, he came himself, his steps measured, his presence unmistakable even before she saw him. The wolf dog preceded him, padding across the yard with solemn purpose, stopping just short of where she stood. When the Duke reached her, he removed his gloves slowly, as if acknowledging that what followed could not be handled with barriers in place. "It is time," he said. No further explanation was offered, nor was one required. She searched his face for uncertainty and found none. Whatever struggle had marked him earlier had resolved into something quieter and far more dangerous: conviction. She nodded once, the motion small but irrevocable. They did not enter the house. Instead, they moved past it, around it, toward the small chapel that had stood on the estate long before the title existed. It was rarely used now, reserved for moments when discretion mattered more than display. The door opened without ceremony. Inside, the air smelled of stone and old prayers, of vows spoken in voices long since faded. A single candle burned near the altar. A clerk waited, summoned without comment, his expression betraying surprise but not protest. The Duke's authority did not require explanation. When he gestured for her to step forward, she did so, aware that every footfall carried the weight of a choice made freely, without illusion. The words were spoken plainly. No audience gathered. No music swelled. The simplicity of it stripped away all pretense, leaving only intent. When the Duke gave his name, he did so not as a shield but as an offering, and when she accepted it, she felt not rescued but claimed in the most deliberate sense. There was no flourish in the kiss that followed, only a brief, solemn acknowledgement of a bond sealed before dawn. Outside, the wolf dog lifted its head, sensing the shift. The night held its silence. They emerged as the sky began to pale, that quiet hour when the world rearranges itself without announcement. The house lay ahead, unchanged in form, yet altered beyond recognition. She stood beside him, not behind, not hidden, and in that alignment felt the truth of what had occurred settle into place. By the time the first servant stirred, the transformation could no longer be delayed. News traveled quickly, carried not by whispers but by certainty. The Duke did not retreat from it. He faced the morning openly, his composure unbroken, his resolve evident in every movement. When questions arose, they were answered not with defense but finality. She walked the grounds differently now, not elevated by pride, but steadied by belonging. Eyes followed her still, but the quality had changed. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Silence replaced mockery. Those who had waited for her removal found themselves recalculating their positions, their assumptions rendered obsolete by a single, irrevocable act. When the aunt returned, summoned by rumor and disbelief, she was received without ceremony. The Duke did not argue. He did not persuade. He simply stated what had been done. The woman, practiced in influence, found none to exercise. The house had already adjusted its loyalties. Later, when the day had fully claimed its place, she stood once more near the stable, the place where exile had first taken shelter. The Duke joined her there, his presence familiar now in a way that surprised them both. He said nothing at first, allowing the past to settle without apology. "This is where it began," she said softly. "Yes," he replied, "and where it was decided." She looked at him then, seeing not a savior, not a conqueror, but a man who had chosen clarity over comfort. The world beyond the estate would not change overnight. Judgment would persist. But within these boundaries, a different order had been established, one rooted not in convenience, but in choice. As the sun climbed, casting light across stone and grass alike, she understood that dignity, once claimed, could not be taken again. And the Duke, standing beside her in the full measure of mourning, knew that the greatest scandal he would ever cause was not defiance, but kindness, given without permission and never withdrawn.